Spring Washam, welcome back to the show.
It's my honor to be back with you.
So we're talking about meditation retreats today. We've actually never, I don't quite understand why we've never done a full episode or even much of an episode on retreats on this show, which seems like a version of malpractice, but we're making up for it now, I hope. Let me start with this question, because this is a question I get from people not infrequently. Am I a bad meditator if I have no interest whatsoever in doing a retreat? It sounds like hell. I'm not going to do it. Am I incurable?
Yeah, that's a question I get as well. Well, I'm happy we're talking about retreats because I agree with you. This is kind of where a lot of your magic happened, on a retreat, right? This is where we have breakthroughs. And, all retreats are meant to challenge us. And you kind of have to be ready. You got to be ready for renunciation. You got to be ready to put things aside, and you got to be ready to go deep. So you could still be a great meditator and do, 20 minutes or 30-minute practice every day. But if you're feeling like you want to go underneath the rug, take a deeper dive, retreat is the way to go. Or you're looking for just more understanding, more, a little bit more depth. And retreats are powerful, life-changing for many of us.
You use the word renunciation. That's a bit of a Buddhist term of art. What do you mean by that specifically?
Well, these retreats, as you know, Dan, they're silent. That's one level of renunciation. You have to give up your technology. If you really want to, give yourself over to the practice, no cell phones and computers. And then we're really committing to following these practices of awareness and mindfulness. And it just brings us up against all of our habits. And we have to sort of contain those. So that level of, when I say renounce, it's not like you're going to go and shave your head and start wearing robes. But for a lot of us to be without our phones and to be without this, communication and endless talking, and to just be with our minds, that's it. It can be a challenge in the beginning. It's a shock. It's like a 12-step. It's like, oh my God, I quit my addiction. And then all of a sudden we're in the present moment. And then there we are. Got to deal with it.
Yes, I know that feeling. Okay, so there are many different types of retreats, something approaching infinity. So how do we, maybe can you walk us through some of the different primary flavors of retreat so we just get a sense of what the landscape looks like?
Yeah, there's so many different types of retreats. So when people say meditation retreat, I think you and I have this frame of insight meditation in this kind of more Western Theravada Buddhist tradition, where we focus on mindfulness, right? The 4 foundations of mindfulness: being aware of our bodies, our feelings, our thoughts and emotions. And we do this mix of sitting and walking in silence throughout the day. And there's usually a yoga practice and Dharma talks and meetings with teachers. That's what we were doing primarily at Insight Meditation Society, Spirit Rock Meditation Center in California. This is kind of I think it's a beautiful entry point, and then there's the Goenka retreats, which are kind of a whole nother level, the 10-day course. So people can sometimes be like, is that what I'm going to do? And that's just all sitting. And there's a lot more rigor involved in that. There's a lot more concentration and a lot more structure. I mean, I think they even get you up out of bed if you're not at the meditation. So there's an intensity to that. But for a lot of people, I really think insight meditation retreats, mindfulness-based retreats, usually held in noble silence, outside of meeting with your teachers and essential communication. So it's not like, you're going to get kicked out, but, we limit our chit chat with the other participants on the retreat. And we're just really focused on the practice of mindfulness.
Just to pick up on, well, I guess I've got a statement and a question. The statement is just to pick up on your helpful description of the landscape of possible options when it comes to meditation retreats specifically. I'm not an expert in this. You know a lot more than I do, but basically, as I understand it, there's in the Buddhist tradition, there are two quite well-known centers on the East Coast. It's the Insight Meditation Society, which is in Massachusetts. On the West Coast, there's Spirit Rock, which is where I did my first retreat, where I met you. And there are some smaller centers throughout the country, and then there's also in a related but separate school of Buddhism, there is Goenka, which was started by a guy named S.N. Goenka, who was an Indian gentleman who I believe grew up in Burma or Myanmar and learned meditation there, and then started a series of meditation centers all over the place. I know there's one in Massachusetts. I believe there are others not only in the States but all over the world. And those retreats tend to be at least 10 days long, and they're quite disciplined. They're all sitting instead of a mixture of sitting and walking meditation, and the schedule is really rigorous. At Spirit Rock and IMS, there are different lengths. You can go for a weekend, 5 days, 10 days. The IMS has a 3-month, which you've done many of, you personally, Spring. And those centers too have pretty rigorous schedules. I mean, you're up at 5:30, sitting by 6, and you sit for an hour or something like that. And then you have breakfast, and then maybe do some chores. And then it's a rock block of sit, walk, sit, walk, sit, walk until lunch. And then a little break again, and you get a yogi job, like cleaning pots or ringing bells or whatever. And maybe you do it after lunch or after breakfast. And then there's another sit, walk, sit, walk, sit, walk until dinner, which many people skip for reasons you might want to talk about. And then more sit, walk, Dharma talk evening, and then more sit, walk, and then bedtime. And if you're not sleepy, you can just keep sitting and walking. So that's the statement. Although I'd like to hear more about, if you've got some expanding you'd like to do. And then the other thing I'd like to ask you about is noble silence. That's another term of art, noble silence. What does that mean?
Right. Well, you pretty much did a great description of the Insight meditation retreats. And then there's like the big mother, father centers. And then there's a lot of other, small centers focused on insight meditation all across the country. More are coming online every day. Insight meditation communities, sitting groups. If you just want to go to a weekly, more local group, you can find them there. It's quite amazing, actually, how many insight meditation centers. And yes, Goenka is its own thing. And I think Massachusetts has a Goenka center. California has like 3 or 4. It's worldwide. It's actually, Goenka G did a great service. And those retreats are hard work. So maybe not, I don't know. I don't want to not recommend it because a lot of people have gone there and then had, that started their journey because they just didn't know what they were kind of getting into. They're like, okay, Vipassana meditation, great. And then they go and then, so, it's just, I trust wherever people land. And then within that, there's a lot of other kinds of meditation, all different types based on ashrams and teachers and Hindu practices and yogic practices. So I think the noble silence is what scares people initially when they're signing up for a retreat because they're like, oh no, what if I need to talk to someone? What if, it's not like you're being silenced. And that's also a lot of people used to be like, you won't silence me. I used to have to explain, no, this isn't like, it's never silent in your mind. There's more noise there than anywhere. This is just like to calm down one layer of it, right? It's not like your mind is silent. In fact, it gets louder, right? Within a couple of hours of being there, it's like, oh my God, there's a whole tornado happening of voices and criticisms and judgments and commentary that's very loud. So there's nothing ever silent, anyone. If you have a mind, you're going to be busy practicing with it. But it's just to calm the the external. So we're not so focused on everybody else and creating an identity and engaging and talking about ourselves. So we just kind of like cool that part out in order to help the mind find some stillness, right? To just, okay, I'm just going to drop in. I don't have to take care of people here. I don't have to figure out what's going on. These retreats work really well. Everything's tended to, the bells are ringing. So your job when you go on a retreat is just to do the practice. So it's easier in a silent container than, instead of having a chatty lunch. And, that can take us kind of out versus what the practices want to do is just drop us in more to the present moment.
Yeah, I remember thinking of that silence would be, my first retreat was 10 days. And I remember thinking that silence maybe would be challenging. And then two things became apparent. One is that there weren't that many people there I was interested in talking to anyway. The second is that that is by no means the hardest part of a meditation retreat. The hardest part is meditating all day long. And, in the instruction, and you can maybe elaborate on this, is that it's not just about the formal meditation periods, the seated 30 to 60 minute chunks of meditation, and then the walking 30 to 45 minute chunks of meditation. The instruction is to be mindful, to be deliberate, aware, awake, intentional, through every activity of the day. So it's really, there's not supposed to be any let up.
Yeah, but we know there's let ups. As soon as people go in their room and shut the door, they jump up and down and go, I don't have to be mindful right now, So we know, or they start reading books or, looking at their stuff or whatever, we know we're all humans and it's a training, and it's just like, there's momentum with mindfulness, but yes, the encouragement is to try to keep what we call that continuity going, right? So that we're not, we have this crazy thing when the bell rings, we can be very still, but then as soon as we hear the bell, I don't have to be mindful anymore. And we just like, it's like we just let out of a cage or something, right? And we just forget that we're practicing, or that was it. I clocked in the mindfulness and we're not living a mindful life. We want to be integrated, right? We want to be, I love Thich Nhat Hanh, the who passed away not too long ago, the Vietnamese monk and poet and activist and teacher used to say, it's just like gentle mindfulness. When you're washing the dishes, just wash the dishes. Or when you're walking, walk. And when you're sipping tea, sip. It all sounds so simple, but it's surprisingly challenging to do it. So I look at it as like a game. Like, can I be mindful while I make my bed? And then I get interested in where my mind slips off. Like, how did I end up in this Mexico memory? Where was that moment, So I want to encourage people as they're thinking about retreats to not try to aim for perfection. That's where we get sidetracked. We try to be mindful every second and we then start clinging and grasping and feel like a failure. And those are things that come up. I can't meditate. I couldn't nail it in 1 hour. So I'm giving up on this practice for life. I'm thinking, and people need to know that we're training, we have a lifetime of distractedness, and delusion here. And we're moving in a direction of more and more awareness. So I always encourage people to take it easy. I remember that's what I told you, Dan. I was like, just be gentle and natural. Just relax your mind. Don't try too hard. It's like when there's a striving that people bring from their work world into their meditation practice. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to pay attention. It's just suffering. You can't approach your spiritual path like you do a work project. In the next 4 days, I'm going to get to this place at this time. That's a recipe for pain. Take it from me. I know.
You brought up our first one-on-one encounter at Spirit Rock when I was freaking out and thinking about leaving, and I've written about it, as you know, and so I've been able to tell my story publicly. what do you remember that encounter with me? I mean, you see millions of people, so maybe you have no memory of it. But if you do remember it, what do you remember?
I remembered it more after I read the chapter because I didn't know who you were. I just see this yogi in sweatpants coming in looking kind of overwhelmed, which is part of the reason the teachers are there, right? To be like, okay, let's work with what's coming up, what's happening. Let's try to hold it. So I just remember having a really beautiful conversation. I think a long conversation. It was over 30 minutes and just trying to just reiterate the instructions of just presence, but without the striving and just normalizing what's happening. Like, okay, if you're feeling anxiety, this is normal. Let's just name it and open to it. And a lot of times it's the resistance to what is happening that is all the suffering. Once we stop resisting, everything opens up. And so I remember when you left, I think you just felt a little bit more calm because it was like, Dan, this is okay. What's happening? The moment's actually okay. What you're experiencing is okay. This is normal. This is stress. This is fear, or this anxiety or overwhelm, or, these feelings and wanting to run from them. Also okay, right? That's what we do, all of us. So I just remember being like, this is great. We can work with this. Let's just feel it. And I remember you having like this revolutionary look on your face, like, feel this? You were like, I was like, yeah, let's just be with it. That's mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't looking for a certain thing to pay attention. Whatever is present, we can meditate with it by just being aware.
Yeah, you really saved me. I mean, I was just grinding and hustling and trying to win at meditation and just pushing and pushing and pushing. And you basically diagnosed my ailment very quickly and concisely. First of all, I'd been telling all these stories in my head about you. This woman is, like the epitome of all the spiritual cliches. I don't like her. But I couldn't get an appointment with Joseph Goldstein, who was running the retreat. So I got an appointment with you, and I walk in, not so hopeful. And then you immediately just very wisely cut through all of my nonsense. And you were like, dude, you're trying too hard. Just relax. You don't have to push that hard. Just be with whatever's coming up. And then I walked out of there and went into the most glorious meditation session of my entire life, which I then rhapsodized about in a book. And Joseph Goldstein sent me an email after the book came out. He was teaching the annual summer retreat at Spirit Rock, and he wrote, "I'm at the place of your great enlightenment. I'm surprised they haven't put up a plaque."
Yeah, the gratitude hut plaque.
Yeah. But we talked about silence. Let's talk about some of the other rules, because I think people are curious about the blocking and tackling of this. You're not supposed to read books. No sex. No eye contact. No talking even at meals. A lot of people skip dinner for some reason. Can you talk about some of these details?
Yeah. Well, the meditation retreat centers, they're kind of operating as like a pop-up ashram or something. Pop-up, so we do have these rules. And I think the no eye contact is, it's not like it's held with a real intensity. It's just because so many of us communicate with our eyes, and there can be a lot of flirting. People fall in love on these retreats, or they try to engage people with their eyes, like, looking around a lot. So it's just like a little bit of a reminder. Okay, no intense staring at each other. That's just like, you're meant to be on a solo journey with a group of people. You're meant to be having an experience with 50, 75, even 100 people, but you're sort of like in your own space. So the no eye contact, or the encouragement to become aware, is just like, again, it's just pulling in your own energy. It's just like, it's creating kind of boundaries. So, because we're all sitting close together for 10 days. So there's an intimacy actually to meditation retreats. side by side, hour after hour, you're listening to people laughing or wailing or tears or, you see them in the bathroom in the morning with their robe on. There's something so human about it. We're all sitting there trying to be present, you know? So some of these guidelines are just ways that over the years, it just helps while you're on a group retreat of that size. So it's different when you're doing a solo retreat, obviously. So yeah, and then at the meal times are held in silence because the retreats are held in silence. But I'll have to admit, for me, the meals is the most awkward part of the silence, sitting with a group of 75, 100 people very close, and we're all eating our tofu and rice, and we're just kind of, eating and chewing. And yeah, it's awkward. You just got to open to that. But after a few days, you get in the flow of it. But yeah, it's kind of comical at first. I thought you had a funny part in your first book about running down to the kitchen and you were like munching on rice cakes, like to deal with your, yeah. So there's snacks there. It's not like, the food is amazing and nourishing and you can eat at different times, but the meals, we're not used to that. We're used to, mealtime being a social hour. So that's a little challenging for me.
I completely agree with you about the food about silent meals being a little awkward. Also, that the food is generally good at the places that I've been to. It's vegetarian, but they do a good job with it. And there are snacks, so you can have some rice cakes if you want. So it's not like, and more than rice cakes. I mean, there's definitely, you're not meant to like suffer in this regard because there's so many other ways to suffer in that environment. What about dinner? Why do people skip dinner? Not everybody, but some people.
Oh, right. So a lot of times, sometimes people are following more of a monastic precept around not eating after the noon meal. And that kind of is just really optional for people based on their bodies, their health, their practice, where they are. They just have breakfast and lunch. And that gives us more energy for the evening. You can't eat heavy when you're doing a meditation retreat and want to stay awake. It's like if you eat 3 huge meals a day, that could be a lot. So there's always an option for some people. And again, this is different bodies, different people, different practices. At Goenka, they just serve like tea and fruit for dinner. So a lot of times people just eat a light dinner and that just keeps your energy, and you're not expending the kind of energy with like if you're at a full-time work day, and it's a little bit different. So mostly it's in support and it's optional, to skip dinner. And that follows what are the 8 precepts, which is a little bit more of a monastic flavor where you even, make a vow, I won't eat after the noonday meal. This kind of follows the monks and the nuns, especially in the Theravada tradition. So, but it's not mandatory. So don't worry, everybody. You'll get your dinner.
One of the things about silent meals that actually is very helpful is for somebody like me who has a tendency to eat mindlessly and therefore overeat. Really paying attention to the taste of the food, the chewing, when in the chewing process does the taste go away, all this weird stuff your tongue does while you're eating, getting granular about the experience can have benefits that you can carry into your life to be a bit more mindful while you're eating.
Yeah, I think mindful eating it's a revolution right now, right? Eating and intuitive eating till when and a lot of that is paying attention. I know when I'm out to dinner and I'm in social settings where it's like a buffet and we're just chatting. Yeah, we all eat too much. Yeah. So there is something about, the invitation. Again, this is the invitation to explore mindful eating and being present while you're eating all this amazing food. Oh, Spirit Rock, I have to plug all the food at these centers are. I love it. Well, I'm a vegan, so it kind of resonates.